Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. In this video I show you how I made this rectangle skirt. So basically you need a rectangle of fabric, hence the name rectangle skirt. I didn't have one piece big enough, so I used two in slightly different colours of check and then just sewed them together. The width of the rectangle should be the length that you want the skirt to be, plus about an inch extra for your hem, and then the length of the fabric is up to you, but I made it about twice as wide as my waist, and the more fabric you use, the poofier the skirt will be. So I'm just measuring and cutting out the fabric now. And I'm also cutting out a piece for the waistband, which was the measurement of my waist, but then with an extra inch added just for a bit of ease, and then an extra seam allowance added as well. And I cut that out in two pieces of fabric. Here I didn't have a piece long enough, so I had to sew two together, but I cut out two pieces so that the waistband has a front and a back, and then I also needed that in facing as well, just to make the waistband a little bit thicker. So I started off by sewing the waistband, so you can just see me here sewing the pieces of fabric together. And then I'm just going to iron and then iron on my interfacing. So one thing that I did really try and do all the way along this project is to iron the fabric at every stage, because that's something that makes a huge difference as the overall look of the project, but it's something that I always forget to do. So I tried to iron the fabric before I started sewing it, and then I ironed it when I sewed it so that the seams were ironed flat, etc. And it really does make a difference. It is a bit of a pain though, having a hot iron hanging around on your craft table. But now I'm just starting work on the actual skirt. So I've put the waistband to one side, and like I said, I didn't have a piece of fabric big enough, which is why I'm sewing together this blue piece onto the grey piece. Obviously if your fabric is big enough, you wouldn't need to do this step. But I'm just sewing this together, and to make it a little bit neater, I decided to sew as much as possible using French seams. So they're pretty easy. You just sew it together wrong sides facing each other, and then you sew again right sides facing each other, and that way all the mess that you can kind of see here is actually hidden inside the French seam, so it makes the inside look a little bit neater. And because I don't have a serger or any other way to finish off my seams, this is a way that I thought would make them a little bit neater, and it did work. So the inside of my skirt does look pretty good, all the way until I got to the zip, and then the zip proved to be too difficult for me, I'm afraid, so it got a little bit messy at that point. But at this point, everything was still looking reasonably neat. And like I said, I really just tried to keep on top of the ironing, so I ironed the fabric out. Although it wasn't perfect after I'd finished, it was a lot better, which then makes it easier to sew, and it just overall looks better. So I did the same with the waistband. As I said, I had sewed two pieces of fabric together, so I have a front and a back, and then I'm just ironing out the seam flat so it lies flat inside the waistband when it's actually put together, and then I'm ironing on the interfacing. I just got this online, it's pretty cheap, and you just iron it on. I can't say that I use interfacing very often, so I wasn't 100% sure what I was supposed to be doing, but I just followed the instructions that I found online, and I just sewed it to the back of the fabric. I then folded the waistband in half, wrong sides together, so the way that the waistband should be, and then I just ironed it, and then took the pins out, and that way the waistband was just kind of held into position, and then I just sewed all down one edge. And that was just to keep it together and to keep it neat and tidy. Although annoyingly I had some problems with the tension on my sewing machine, so the thread kept snapping, which meant that the sewing got a little bit messy on the waistband, which is a bit annoying. Another option that you can do to finish off the waistband is to use bias binding, but I decided that I just couldn't be bothered making my own bias binding, so I just sewed it. Now I'm just ruching up the waistband, so you just do a loose running stitch all along the edge of your skirt fabric, and then you just pull it until it ruches up to be the same length that your waistband is, so your waist measurement really. And then I just arranged it so that the ruches were evenly distributed, and then you just need to attach the waistband to your skirt. So I started by positioning the ends in place and then the middle, and then kind of worked my way out like that. So I'm just using pins to pin the waistband on to try and keep it in place, because obviously the ruching can move around a little bit and you want to make sure that the end of the waistband and the end of the skirt match, and it might move around when I sew it in the sewing machine. So I'm just going along pinning everything, and I'm only pinning one of the edges. And then this is just after it's been sewed down. I think it was just too difficult for me to try and film whilst I was sewing it. So this is after I've taken the sewing machine to it and I've just sewn one of the sides on, and then this is just what it looks like on the inside. And I only sewed one of the edges so that I could fold the other one over, as I'm trying to demonstrate here, and then sew it on by hand, and then that would cover up the rough edge. This was again me trying to make it look nice on the inside. Which did mean that the only way I could figure out how to do this neatly was by hand sewing, which I absolutely hate. So it was a bit of a sacrifice, but I did it. And here I am just folding under that other side of the waistband and then just pinning it in place and pinning it onto the skirt as well. And some of the interfacing had got caught in the stitching when I attached the waistband initially, so I'm just trimming that a little bit as well. This is one of those projects where I got most of it done in one weekend, mostly in one afternoon, and then the last little bit just dragged on for ages. It just sat on a pile and I never got around to finishing it, and that was just attaching the zip right at the end, and that was a bit that, as I said, proved to be really problematic. So it was just because I'm useless at zips, but I did add the zip at the back and then sew up the back seam, and then this is the finished product and me showing it off. So it's quite fun, and I do like it. And I quite like the fact that it's two different colours, although it does look a bit mad. But I hope you liked the video. Please like it if you did, and please subscribe if you want to see more craft videos, more sewing, more books, more planning, etc.